I like to be mindful of everyone's time and try and be on time. And one of the points of this lunchtime topics is that you can join on your lunchtime and not have to worry about us going over. So good afternoon. I am Jen Bonet with the Creative Coast, and it's great to have you with us here today. This is a lunchtime topic on June 18th, 2020. And we were just talking a little bit about this, with the increase of folks working from home, potentially on their own devices, it's an increased cybersecurity risk for companies and also for individual people. And so I reached out to Randal Humphries, who is a member of the TechSAV group here in town, and asked him to talk about cybersecurity for everyone. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Randal.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Jen. I am Randal Humphries. I am a Savannah native. I've been in technology for about 18 years. I'm currently the Director of Operations at Sumitsu, a local IT provider and fiber internet service provider. Cybersecurity is probably the top of mind topic for most companies these days. It's wildly complicated. I don't ever want to tell you it's not, but it's not. But to get started is actually a low barrier to get started. To be thinking this way, to be asking those questions, to be wondering about it. So, without much more, let's get into it. Cybersecurity is a deep and rich topic. Like I said, I've been at this for 18 years, and I would tell you that I'm very experienced, but I don't even know that I would tell you I'm an expert. And anytime anyone says I'm an expert, I kind of wonder just a little, because that seems a touch optimistic, a touch flattering of themselves. Cybersecurity in its very, very basics is just a set of concepts and techniques and tools that secure information. At the end of the day, it's always about information, whether that be on paper, whether that be stored on the cloud, whether that be stored on your workstation, how you access it, who accesses it, and what processes it goes through to be protected. That's all cybersecurity is. And if you have a password on your Wi-Fi, you have some basic cybersecurity. If you have a decent router, you have some basic cybersecurity. So whether you know it or not, you have already kind of begun this. So the next steps are really just about knowledge, taking it just a little bit further. A couple of key things I feel. Cybersecurity in the digital age, in the modern age, in our contemporary age, is absolutely critical to you. It is not something that is optional anymore. It hasn't been, honestly, for years. But to me, it is as critical to your safety of you, your family, your business, as seat belts, deadbolts, smoke alarms, a burglar alarm. It is that critical. If you are not at least thinking along these lines, you're leaving yourself very, very vulnerable. I say it's available to everyone regardless of technical skill, budget, or business size. A lot of times we think of cybersecurity as being the purview of big governments or big enterprises. That's a marketing ploy, to be perfectly honest. In technology, we've done a kind of a bad job of including the layperson, the every person, because if you run a business, chances are it's not technical. That's just the odds. You do something else for a living. But cybersecurity matters to you. It's up to people like me, professionals, to make that accessible to you at a reasonable price, in a way you can understand, in a way that expresses how important it is to you. So don't ever think that this is not something that affects you, both personally and professionally. It affects you, I assure you. I like this slide, as stupid as goofy as it is. What cybersecurity is not. It is not magic. Don't ever let nerds like me tell you that that I've got to be in a hoodie in the dark room with the matrix code in the back. That's not what I do. That's not what any of us do. It is not the concern of large business and government.
Randal, I'm going to interrupt. Yeah. Sorry, I don't think your slide is forwarded. I'm still seeing cybersecurity for everyone.
Oh no. How about now? Let me do this.
No, I don't see it. See the top right corner, click on the present button so that we see presentation view. Sorry, the next to the gold share button in Google. Yeah, right. To the right. There we go. Woohoo! Yay!
Oh, oh, I'm very sorry. Oh my
No
Lord.
problem. Now I can see it. Great. Awesome.
Thank you very much, Jen. So this is the slide I was just referring to. The other slide is just my goofy face. You can see that already. This picture of this guy, I don't have that office in my office. We don't have that in a NOC or a data center. I'm sure maybe somewhere this room exists with this person, but that's not what cybersecurity is. It's not what cybersecurity looks like. CSI and other shows make that very, very real, but that's not real at all. Can everyone still see that? Okay. I want to start with just, I want to get deeper into this by starting right here. Who wants my data? That's probably the first thing. You think to yourself, I'm small. I have, 2 employees or just me, and, who cares about little old me? The answer to that question is lots of people. It's not as targeted as
Randall,
you think
I'm
it
not
is.
sure. Sorry, I'm not sure. We're still on what cybersecurity is not.
Hold up. Bear with me a moment. Present, Zoom, share.
Now I see who wants my data. You want to try and forward?
Yeah.
Yes. And why? Yes. Yes. And why?
Okay.
Great. Now it's working.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Sorry about that.
No, I don't know. Anyway, me being me, I guess. So who wants my data? Most of that isn't as targeted as you think. You think of like a burglar or someone like that who has cased your joint, so to speak, as they say in the movies. That's not what happens typically. What they find you randomly on the internet. Being on the internet makes you vulnerable. They find you absolutely at random, and most of it is trial and error. They send out ransomware and things like this purely in mass. It's a volume business, and if they come up with something great, that's what they want. If they don't, they don't. There are targeted attacks, but typically you're a person of interest. Think larger enterprises or something like that. But just because you're not a specific person of interest doesn't mean you're not susceptible. It happens every day, all the time. Talking about who, I say hackers in parentheses. We know what I mean. We obviously something negative. The bad actors, it's sometimes called in the industry, but they're basically malicious individuals, people who want to disrupt your business, capture data, for sale typically, and we'll talk about reasons in a moment, but that's basically hackers in this case. Sometimes that's political. Anonymous has been in the news a lot lately, and that's purely politically motivated, but that's who, when I say hackers. I put the quotes because some of us who've been at this a while think of hackers as hobbyists or enthusiasts or those who are passionate. I think of myself as a hacker. Honestly, I don't say that a lot because people will look at me funny. But that's the parentheses there. That's the quotes there. Governments, that sounds conspiratorial. I assure you it's not. The disclosures by Ed Snowden several years ago showed that our government and other governments are capturing data, are consuming that data. Mostly that is security, national security reasons. But in the case of some Russian, Chinese, Ukrainian, some other countries, that actually is economically motivated, strangely enough. And then corporations and I say ISPs, internet service providers, corporations being basically any company that makes money might be capturing data. ISP in this case being Comcast, AT&T, your internet service provider. You're using their pipe to get to the internet, and quite frankly, they can track everything if you're not taking some precautions. They can tell what site you go to, how long you're there, how many times a day, how many times a week, whatever. Corporations kind of in the same vein. Obviously, Facebook is probably the most famous example of this, but many others. TikTok, which has gained popularity lately, captures a lot of information about its users. Geolocation data. From mobile devices, which is a little scary, but that's true, and other kinds of information. So that's the who. why? Now, did everyone see that move? Okay. Why do they want my data? Tip top money. I would love to tell you there's some kind of more romantic cause that there's being championed. Not typically. Typically, it's simply about money. Identity theft is a absolutely fantastically huge business. It's actually hard to to overstate how much money is being made illegally, of course, by identity theft, frauds, ransomware, and crypto attacks, as they're called. By which a piece of software infects your machine, encrypts all your data, hides it from you, and holds it ransom for a sum of money, typically in Bitcoin. So that's tip top, number one. Governments, you get into things like surveillance, and there's a whole different deep topic there. I always feel that's kind of a subject unto itself. So, well, surveillance that's real, it's true, it happens, but most people, if you're taking the necessary steps to protect yourself from the others, you're kind of protecting yourself from surveillance as well. What do they want? What data do they want? This is it, folks. Identity is probably the single biggest thing. I'm using a industry term here, a personally identifiable information, PII. If you work in healthcare, you've probably heard it expressed as PHI, which is personal healthcare information or personal health information. So these are going to be social security numbers, dates of birth, gender identity, location, billing addresses, all of this kinds of information. Of course, things like credit card numbers and those kinds of things come to mind as well. But that's exactly what they want. Credit card numbers that work on the illegal marketplaces where those things are traded, go for about 10 to 15 bucks. You can typically even get them in bulk. It's wild. The same thing true with social security numbers. They're traded in batches of hundreds sometimes for very little money, because that's how prevalent the crime has become, that it's a volume business. So other things we get into around identity come into personal associations, socio-political associations, and that goes more into surveillance, but personal associations and socio-political actually come into economics as well. Facebook cares. Facebook cares, Twitter cares. They market you with an ad based on trends and tracks. If they think you are a liberal leaning person, they're going to say, okay, what's a product for a liberal leaning person or a conservative leaning person or whatever. These things actually matter. Behavior kind of goes into this as well, where we get into where you spend your time online, who you spend it with, what kind of apps you're opening and spending time on, products you hover over. We've all experienced this. This is not new, where you are on Amazon, and nowadays even talking about Amazon. There was a story about a year ago now where Apple admitted that Siri was kind of always listening. And you could talk about things around your phone, not on your phone, just with it near you, which is all of us all the time. And you would then begin to see strange ads on things like Facebook and other things where it had obviously heard you were talking about, I don't know, a widescreen TV, or I don't know, a bath bomb, or whatever it is you were talking about. And so that's very real, and that plays heavily into money. The surveillance economy, as it's called, is booming. Username and passwords are exactly what that is. There's nothing really complex about why they want that. They want to be able to impersonate you, and getting that gets them access to everything else, including financial data, bank accounts, credit cards, PayPal accounts, etc. Nothing elegant, nothing romantic. It's ultimately about money, just like most crime. How do they get it? There are two concepts to get kind of familiar with, is this idea of in transit and this idea of at rest. And if you talk to an industry professional like me, we'll talk about that amongst ourselves. We'll talk about how data gets from place to place. So think of it this way. An attachment on an email is in transit the minute you hit send to the minute it is received by the recipient. It is in transit. It's moving between servers, and that data is too. That's a point of failure per se. It's a point of attack, where that's a place where it could be intercepted. Another thing to think about here is, and that's true, websites you go to, this Google presentation, Google Slides I'm using, that's data coming to and from my computer, this call even, to and from my computer from Zoom servers. That's data moving around from my computer through their servers to your computer. At any point in those connections between those servers, it can be intercepted theoretically. And then apps that do things on your behalf. You've probably seen this where you sign up for a particular service or a particular app and it wants to access your Amazon account or wants to access your Facebook account. That now means that information is traveling from the Facebook service, as an example, to their server. Well, is that connection secure? How secure? That's a point of failure. That's not even something you've initiated directly, something that's being initiated on your behalf. This is also true, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but this is also true when you talk about apps that access things on your phone. You know, may I have access to your contacts, your calendar, etc. Camera is probably the most common one.
Randall, I have a question on the in transit, because something recently happened to me and I was made to feel like I was freaking out, but I'm refinancing my house and my mortgage broker called me up and said he needed some important tax information from me and said it would be faster if I just emailed it to him. And I refused because it has my tax ID on it. So I was like, can't I just put it in, like, give me access to the portal, I'll upload it to your portal and you'll get it there. He's like, that's, you know, he was like hemming and hawing over that. But
sure.
I mean, even like a W-9 attached as a PDF to an email I send is totally unsecure unless I lock the PDF and give it a password. Well,
there are two things. Number one, let me congratulate you for thinking that way, because it is more hassle. There's no doubt about it. We're adding layers to a process. So I'm sure that person just was like, it's another thing, but that information is quite sensitive that you're handing him. Locking that document is pretty good. There are limitations of that, but it's definitely a good step. If his email server and your email server, let's say you're using Gmail and he's using, I don't know, Office 365 perhaps, if that communication between them is a secured encrypted connection, and then that example they would be, that's okay. I still would feel personally very uncomfortable with it. I want to do something else, but you're assuming a lot, right? You don't know what that email address is. You don't know what his email server is. You don't know how well that's guarded. You don't even know how good his password is. Let's just put it out there. And so if, for example, that we're going to some private email server, maintain themselves or whatever, that communication may just be plain text and can be absolutely intercepted. And then at least in that case, you would have a password on the PDF, which gives yet another barrier to someone trying to compromise it. But depending on the version of Adobe you have and how you do it and how good that password is, it still may not be great. But so services like ShareFile from Citrix are great at this, and they're relatively inexpensive. It's really worth your while to share, because it's all easier for the recipient. That's the part I like. You log in, you upload what you need to upload. If you've never used it, you upload what you need to upload, send them a link. They click the link in the email, have to create an account very quickly, get the document. It's really not that big a deal.
That's one of the things that was so strange about this experience is he had already set me up with the bank's kind of file manager so I could upload all my stuff. And then he said, just shoot it to me in email real quick. And I was like, it's got my social security number on it. I think I'll just upload it. You can find it there.
Yeah, well, especially if we've already gone through that setup, then I'm unclear what problem he was trying to solve. But yeah, fair enough. That's an impulse that's really, really common though. If I just may expound on that just a touch more, that's an impulse that's really, really common. I need this right now. It's really, I'm in a pinch for it. I'm trying to get a thing done. Just get it to me. That's really not. Would you leave your car unlocked if you were and go? Well, I don't know. That may be a bad example, depending. But if you think about that, it's kind of the same thing. Would you leave your car unlocked in an unknown, unfamiliar neighborhood just to get a thing done very fast? You probably wouldn't. Same idea. The internet is the bad unknown neighborhood. To put that plainly. But yeah, that's services like ShareFile would do, even for an individual, they're really inexpensive per month. It's really worth your while. It's weird to me that after going through that process of setting you up with the banks in a secure way, that's still, the impulse was still to Just it's easier. Just send it. No, 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 no. But that's true about a lot of in-transit stuff. So the two big things being your email. People still conduct a ton of business by email, and then people who have to upload things to and from the internet, which you do a lot, whether you actually are conscious of it or not. The other concept there is at rest, which is that means when it gets to where it is going, or stored at the source, wherever it is kept normally. Is that encrypted? Is that protected? Is there malware protection? Is that a thing that's physically protected? Can anyone just walk up to this thing and touch it and fumble with it? I am almost 40 years old, and I'm going to tell you right now, every time I go, well, less lately, given COVID precautions, but I had a really bad habit for a long, long time. Every time I was in a store that had computers out in a place I could touch them, like on display or whatever, I fumbled with them. I was like, I'm just curious. What's going on? I'm just curious. I'm not looking to break them, but the curiosity is overpowering. For me, at least, if I were a less scrupulous person though, could I do that to an office place that is open, which has very little self safeguards to it, where people can roam? Can I touch your machine? Is it locked? Does it automatically screen lock? Do I have to put in a password? Do I have to put in a password routinely? If I can touch your machine for a few minutes unlocked as you, then I have access to everything that you do. So just things like that when I say at rest. And then encryption. And encryption is simply about, if you have a Mac, and we'll talk about encryption as kind of a whole nother thing. If you have a Mac or a PC, a modern Windows 10 PC, it's absolutely dead simple to turn that on. And that means that unless I can log in successfully, I cannot decrypt that hard drive. That data on that drive is gibberish and is useless to me. So that's what I mean. Service providers. We give a great deal of information to companies like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, even Google, without thinking about what they do with it. How they protect it, how they safeguard it. Do they have good protections, reasonable protection? We assume they do. There's a trust relationship there. We assume they do, but do we know that? They have to tell you by law, by the way, and we can talk about that again in just a moment. But that leads me to just ask that question: if your email is hosted, if you don't host your own email server, and you probably don't these days, how well is that protected? How good are your passwords? What service is it? What's their track record? Those kinds of questions. Social networks are. Wow, social networks are kind of a bottomless. I have social networks. I have TikTok. I have Twitter. I have all of them because I love a gadget. I love a new thing, but the privacy settings are a maze. Which brings me to this: what can we do about all of this? Privacy consciousness is probably the absolute best thing, as Jen was just highlighting in her own day-to-day life. Just taking a moment, realizing that doesn't feel very safe. That doesn't make a ton of sense. And even if you're not a technically inclined person, just think about that. Does that make sense? How comfortable does that make you feel? What is the trust level between you and the person you're dealing with, you and the website you're dealing with? How do I feel about that? How do I, with an Amazon Echo or a Google Home or an Apple HomePod, you think to yourself, here's a microphone and speaker, or a camera in many cases now, that I'm going to place around my home. And I'm actually beginning to see them a lot in businesses, particularly things like Ring devices. And we'll talk about IoT. It's kind of a whole subject unto itself. But you're engaging with these companies and asking yourself, even with Apple on your iPhone, how do they protect it? Is it? How well do they do? It sounds incredibly boring, but the terms of service almost always have a privacy document. And almost all of these services will have a privacy notice, if you will. And you probably get, well, you may remember when Europe made its big privacy change, how many different terms of service notifications you got in a month because of this. They have to, by law, tell you what they're doing to protect your data, how they intend to use your data. Read them. Unfortunately, not all of them are made to be consumed by the average person, but most of them are, because again, by law, they have to tell you. If they're collecting data from you, they have to tell you how they protect it and what they plan to do with it. They have to. So keep them honest and read it, and then make a decision. Is that worth it to me? Is the risk reward here worth it to me? Does the thing I'm signing up for, or the person I'm transacting business with, do I have a trust level that makes me feel okay? Do I Are they, is the risk inherent here worth whatever reward I'm getting from using the thing? But just be conscious. And if I could leave you with a single thing today, it would be just think about it. Just be aware and be make informed decisions around that. And if you're not sure, ask a professional. I almost said expert, and I just said earlier, but I thought about that word. But ask a professional, ask someone you trust. How that, what the risk is, is it okay? Is there an alternative that's more secure? Those kinds of things. Encryption, I've already used that word a handful of times. Encryption is very simply, it's an ancient process that people used to do by hand. Computers have made it infinitely more complex and fast and just reliable overall. But encryption is probably the single best thing you can do for a lot of your things. Make sure that the websites you use are encrypted, that encryption is being used, is enabled on your mobile devices, is enabled on your computer, if that's possible, or technically possible. It probably is, by the way. Use a VPN, and again, these are all things we'll talk about a little more in depth. But encryption is the word. You should always be thinking to yourself, is how I'm transmitting this data encrypted? Because if it's not, it's guaranteed to be insecure. If it is, then there's at least a higher level of trust right there, because there is some technical security happening. Anti-malware or antivirus is huge. There are many good ones, many ones that are free or at least low cost. I have my recommendations, my favorites. There are a bunch. That's another thing. Do your research, find one that fits your price. Again, I'll give some recommendations on that. But that is another point of failure for most people, particularly if you have a Mac. Apple for many years had an assumption that Macs don't get viruses. That is a lie. That is not true. That is false. There's no data to support that. For a long time, they didn't get as many. That's just a statistical reality, but that's not true anymore. Apple got popular in the last decade or so, and so did viruses for them, malware for them. So they're just as susceptible as any other computer. They do a very good job from a security standpoint, but you should still have any virus or any malware. Awesome passwords. Almost everything you use is probably secured with a password of some kind or the other. There are myriad methodologies for creating good passwords. I have my own recommendations we'll get into, but these 4 things are kind of at the high level, something what you should be thinking about kind of all the time when it comes to your technology and how you touch your technology and interact with your technology. I've already said this, but the privacy policies are huge. Again, almost every service you use, if they're legitimate, will have a privacy policy. Read it. If they don't, do not do business with them. Do not interact with them. Don't give them anything, because you have no guarantee, none, that they will be good stewards of the information you give them or trade with them. Privacy settings. This is a big thing on social, but it's really true for even mobile devices. Check your phone, check your iPhone, check your Android device. See what devices are accessing data on your phone. They'll ask you all the time, may I, they'll access the camera? No, I don't understand why Google Maps needs to access my camera. I don't want it to do that. Why would it need to turn on my camera without my direct intervention? I don't think I wanted to do that. But just make that decision for yourself, obviously. But just think about that. Why does this app need access to my contacts? What is it doing with that information? Does it need it? So, and then privacy settings. Who can see what you share, what you post? That's a moving target. I'm just gonna. That's a forever job. Because they change this all the time. They move these all the time. Facebook is kind of famous for changing these around, and they've made some big mistakes around that too, where they've obviously Cambridge Analytica being kind of a point of that, and some other things. But do take the time. It's worth it in the long run. Familiarize yourself, and just always be thinking about what's my security here? Like, how secure am I in this interaction, in this thing I'm using? Encryption, I told you to talk about it. It's a big thing. So HTTP versus HTTPS, that is huge right there. If you are browsing around on the internet, you want always to see HTTPS in the top of your browser, up there in the location bar. That's what you want to see, HTTPS. Most browsers these days, Safari, Chrome, Firefox, all will give a little green indication of when that is secure. I think Chrome even says the word secure, or I give you a little padlock or something like that. In Safari and Firefox give you a little padlock indicating the connection between my browser, my computer, and the website I'm interacting with is secure, is encrypted. The data I'm sharing there is not just open for the world to intercept. If you're using HTTP as just plain text, if I were capturing that information on the network, I could read everything you type. The username, the password, any personal information, anything you send it, anything it sends you, it could be read. So HTTPS. If you don't see that on a secure site or on a site you're using, think twice about what you enter. Mobile devices, phones, obviously. This has been true for some years now, but if you enable a passcode on your iPhone, on your iPad, on your Samsung Galaxy Tab or Galaxy Note, whatever, your Android device, those devices will encrypt the storage will encrypt the drive, will encrypt the device. Do it. Make it as complex as you can stand, that passcode. It's easy to turn on. They nowadays, most of them, when you set up a new one, make you do it, which is great. But definitely do it. Again, we're adding layers, so it is a touch of a hassle occasionally, but please do. A note on that around things that unlock for thumb scans, if you're using like Touch ID on an iPhone, or and I'm an iPhone user, so I'm a little more familiar with some of that, but I know Android has an equivalent. Or Face ID. I use Touch ID myself, fine. That's all stored locally on the device. It's no big deal, which is why you have to recreate it when you get a new one. The Face ID makes me nervous, personally. Taking a picture of taking a picture of my face makes me nervous. That's just me. But do your own research. I did, and just said the reward there just isn't worth it to me personally, but you may find it is. Hard drives and flash drives. Hard drives being the storage device of your computer, where all your files are. If you have a Mac or or a Windows machine, again, turning it on is pretty trivial. It's absolutely critical, but the same thing. If I were to steal this device, can I get into your files? Can I pull the hard drive out of it and plug that hard drive into something else and access that data? If it's encrypted, I can't without the encryption key. So, ball game. I still don't have my device, but at least you don't have my data, you know? A VPN. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. That's a way to secure things, much like HTTPS. That is a way to secure communication in transit. HTTPS just does web traffic in a browser. VPN would actually encrypt every request, all the information that comes in and out of your computer, regardless of how you're accessing it, just regardless. So VPN is kind of your catch-all solution for a lot of that. Email, encrypted email is really a whole topic. Most services like Gmail, especially if you're using G Suite or Office 365, have some function to encrypt messages. You have to kind of trust those companies that do it. They both have pretty good track records. Again, I have other recommendations, but that is by default. Email is plain text. So unless it is turned on and designed to work that way, the servers are designed to work that way by default. That's not secure. So you want that encryption on that email service you're using. Chat, IM, text. That's a hard thing, that's a much harder thing to encrypt. And we'll talk about that, but that's another communication avenue most people have. They don't think about their text. They don't think about any chat apps they use if they're using something like Messenger or something like that. Facebook Messenger, I mean. So just another thing to think about in this encryption discussion. So the S stands for secure. That is 100% true. I never said people in technology were great at naming stuff, but at least it's easy. As I said earlier, HTTPS is encrypted end to end from your browser to that server, end to end, and that's exactly what you want. There's a plugin though called HTTPS Everywhere. It's a plugin for Safari, Chrome and Firefox. I recommend you download it. It is 100% free. And it will, if you ever go to the plain text, the insecure version of a website, it will automatically flip you to the secure one. So that can save your skin. If you're, and again, for free, you know, so HTTPS everywhere. The passcode, I've already said it. I can't say, I mean, again, most people set these up by default. Most devices make you. Please do it. And please stretch the limits of what you think you can remember. I bet you can remember better than you think you can, if pressed to do it. So good passcodes mean good security on your mobile device. That's just the equation. Drives, hard drives, flash drives. File Vault on a Mac, easy to turn on. There's nothing to it, right there in system preferences. It'll take a minute to encrypt your drive, but it does it in the background. It's not that big a deal. If you have Windows 10 Pro, you have access to what's called BitLocker, which is basically their version, and to encrypt the drive and all the data on it. I recommend you turn it on. For any encryption service, this is true. There'll be a key that's produced, a password that has to be saved, because if it has to be saved somewhere. Keep it somewhere secure. Some people print them out and keep them in a safe, which, okay, that's sure, that'll work. Whatever, you know, whatever. I have some other suggestions around that, but just turn those on, keep those keys. Without that key, the data on that drive is absolutely useless. If you don't have Windows 10 Pro, or so if you have Home or even Windows like 8 or Windows 7, which you should definitely get rid of, because that's end of life and a big security concern. There's a program called Descriptor. It's unfortunately not maintained anymore, but it still does a very good job. It is free, which is also the nice part, and very, very easy to set up. If you're using Linux, if you have a Linux workstation, you're probably not listening to me because you are hyper nerd and are probably awesome at this. So, but there are theirs too. If you're interested, I have recommendations there. In addition to encrypting all the data sent and received from your computer, it helps mask identity, because when you use a VPN, you are basically routing all of your information in a secure, what they call a secure tunnel, in a connection from where you are to some secure server that routes all that information out. So you can even appear to, if I were to connect to a VPN, for example, here in Savannah, Georgia, I could actually appear that I've come from Columbus, Ohio, or Paris, France, even, for that matter. If you're on an open wireless or an open network, anywhere, at a Starbucks, at a hotel, or whatever, this is absolutely critical. You must, please do this. Please do this for yourself. A VPN is absolutely critical. My recommendations, I have 4 down here that I've tried personally. They work great. I've decided on NordVPN personally, just because it was priced right and very simple. Had a nice mobile app, had a nice Mac app. It was nice. But the other ones are very good too. Hotspot Shield is actually free for mobile devices, so think about that if you want to secure your phone. If I'm out and about, I typically will have my VPN turned on, almost always. If I'm not on the network, in fact, I've got to set my Mac to do that. Anytime I connect to a network that I have not explicitly set as a trusted network, it automatically turns on, so I don't even have to worry about it. But this is absolutely critical for you, because there are lots of data that comes in and out of your machine on a network that you don't even know is doing it. It broadcasts the computer's name, its IP, other kinds of information that leaks, as we say in the industry, and this encrypts all of that. This is also, I'll tell you this is also a way to get around certain kinds of blackouts for television. FYI, you can stream things in a different region, but that's, I don't think, what they designed to do, but it just happens that way. If you, these 4 I can attest to personally. I recommend them. I will also tell you there are many others. Some antivirus and other kinds of security companies like Bitdefender or whatever have their own. I would tell you, do your research. The key thing you want to be sure is happening is no logging, because some of these services will actually keep logs, which is kind of the same thing of just being unprotected. If they are logging where you're going, through the VPN, you really haven't protected yourself from much. And you don't know, again, what are they going to do with that data? What do they care? Why do they care? That's interesting. Why do you want to know where I go? Are they sharing that with my ISP? Are they sharing that with Facebook or some other company? Are they sharing that with a governmental agency? I don't know. So do your research. No logging, or as little logging as possible. Almost all of these have well, I say all of these have no logging, or what they call debug logging, meaning there's no personal information whatsoever. Email. There's a bunch of different ways to achieve this. There's a couple of tools, PGP tools on a Mac, or PGP for Win if you want to take a manual route to encrypting your email. So say you use a Gmail, you can actually set these up to encrypt your message before Gmail sends it, which means even if you log into your Gmail on a website and through the web, it's encrypted there. There's a little more hassle to that, and it does take a little bit of technical savvy. It's not that easy. I would recommend moving to an encrypted email service. LavaBit and Proton Mail are two that are very, very well regarded. I'm actually going to be moving my own personal email, which is now hosted through G Suite, to Proton Mail. They're relatively affordable. If you can, I would also tell you from the big companies, Office 365 has a fantastic track record around this. So, but that kind of depends on how much you trust Microsoft or want to get in with Microsoft. Your mileage may vary. I've been in IT long enough that Microsoft's Microsoft, but LavaBit and Proton Mail are two very, very good ones. Phishing. I kind of want to talk about this, not in relation to encryption per se, but phishing. A good anti-malware, a good email service even, will help you with phishing. Phishing, P-H-I-S-H-I-N-G, is the process of sending out fake emails. They're phishing, so to speak, for phishing for I guess victims, sadly. So what this is doing is sending, and you probably received them, they've become really, really, really common in the last decade or two, to see fake UPS alerts, fake Amazon alerts, fake PayPal. A lot of times they're very obvious. Some of them have been very good. 9 times out of 10, there's a link to click that will go to a website that may also look very, very legitimate and be a very good forgery of a real one. Although there'll typically be something a little off about it, but it's very hard to spot if you're not paying attention. Clicking that link will likely take you will likely get you infected with some kind of ransomware or crypto virus, as they're called, that will hold your machine hostage, or install something that allows that machine to then be used as what's called a zombie, or make it a part of a botnet where the attacker can then connect to it and use it for some other nefarious end, entirely without your knowledge or consent, of course. And so being aware of emails you get that just don't seem right. And I tell people all the time, regardless of your technical skill, regardless of your comfort level there, just common sense is a lot. If you see something, and this is true across the board, not just with the phishing emails, but if you see something that just doesn't feel right, why did I get this from Bank of America? They never email me. Why now did they email me? Those kinds of things. If you can just take a moment, take that pause, and just think, that doesn't seem right, and just ask that question. And the truth is, if you call those institutions, if you called Bank of America and say, hey, did you send this money? You call customer service, which is a little bit of a hassle, but if you did that, or even just looked at the email, just scrutinized it just a little bit, you'd see that maybe it's misspelled strange, or something spelled strange, or the link doesn't feel right, or just something's weird. That can save you so much headache and heartache and hassle and possibly money. So just it's a common sense thing. Just if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't, is the short answer. Chat IM text. This is, I'm sure no one actually cares about the poop emojis or whatever, or smiley faces being public or not public, but things you say in your text and iMessage or whatever are often, sometimes that's client information. Strangely enough, we actually deal with a fair amount of clients that way, or ourselves, and in just personal. iMessage is well secured. I'm just going to put that out there. Gmessage is, or Gchat as it's called now, but I don't know, your mileage may vary. I would make my own call on how you feel about that. I would tell you that Chat Secure and Signal are are absolutely good third-party options. A lot of people use WhatsApp, and WhatsApp had a big thing around how security is. They actually had a big marketing campaign around how their security. They're owned by Facebook, so there you go. Make your call. But that's that. But same issue, encryption. Signal and Chat Secure are great. iMessage is fine, but if you really want that extra layer, Signal or Chat Secure. Signal can also do calls, which is neat if you need that. We've already talked about this, but I want to just touch on this. Bitdefender, AVG, Malwarebytes, and ESET, E-S-E-T, and Sophos are 5. That's a lot of good options here. I say internet security appliance. If you're a business, this is probably well worth it, even if you're not, to be honest. Some things like the Bitdefender box or the Kuje Smart Firewall are great options for a home to give you that extra level of security on the internet. They're doing anti-spam checking, or they're doing anti-malware checking right there and that sort of thing right there on the wire that comes from Comcast or comes from AT&T or whatever. If you're a business, something like a SonicWall is a great option as a brand. It's a little more money, but it's also a little more featureful and fast and so on, so probably worth it. But I mean, we've been people in IT, people in technology. We've been preaching anti-malware, anti-virus forever. Passwords. I would tell you that the 2 biggest things you can realize is the passwords you use and reuse probably aren't great. They're probably relatively short. They're probably relatively predictable. If I spend a few minutes with you and we have a reasonable conversation, chances are I can pick up some things that would let me guess, okay, daughter's first name, your birthday, they just random information. I could probably glean the basics of your password. So the longer your password is, the better. And the more random it is. I tend to use entirely random passwords almost exclusively, which I can do because of a password manager. Password manager allows me to create a random password and store it for me. So I have in an encrypted vault, as it's called, my passwords. I have to remember the password to it, and that's it, which is long and complex, but I'm only having to remember one of them, so it's really not that much of an ask. 2-factor authentication. If you've ever used your iPhone or you ever logged into your iPad and your iPhone pops up and says, allow this, here's a 6-digit code, that's 2-factor. Apple has turned this on, Google's turned it on for a lot of devices as well. Most sites, a lot of sites you deal with actually have this as a feature, and it is free and it's very easy to set up. All that essentially means is, in addition to a username and password, I have to provide it usually a text message, usually a code provided by a text message or a code provided by an app. Yes, it is one more step. I assure you, it does everything for you as far as security goes. Because even if I could give you my password well, anything really, I guess, anything I can turn on, password to my Twitter or password to my whatever, it would mean nothing to you if you didn't also have my phone, just nothing. You couldn't do anything with that information. My password manager, as an example, has 2-factor turned on. I can give you the password to that, but unless you have my phone, where that is algorithmically giving me that secure code, it doesn't mean anything. You can't do anything with it. I typically recommend against Chrome or Firefox or Safari's password management. They've gotten better over time. They've gotten actually pretty good, but pretty good just doesn't cut it. I think they've got some ways to go. I would turn that off, clear those out, and move to an actual password manager, something like LastPass or 1Password or KeePass X. I like LastPass and 1Password. They're cloud-based and have good apps and are very easy to set up. KeePass is nice, but it's all local. You have to install a thing on a machine, and you can't really access it from anywhere else, and it's just awkward. But it fits some needs, and it's free, so there's that. LastPass and 1Password do charge, but it's very, very cheap. I want to say it's a few dollars a month. Very much worth it. Internet of Things. I mentioned this at the very, very beginning. Internet of Things. Your Nest thermostat is an internet-connected device. It's online. We don't think about that as a computer, but it's a computer, and it can be compromised. It's connecting out to something. If you have a smart TV or now you have smart fridges and smart everything. It seems like I make the coffee maker joke, but I don't know that it's a real thing, but probably. Do your research. Does this need to be internet connected? Does that do something I want it to do? And it may. I have a Nest thermostat. It's handy. However, read the privacy policy. How much information does it gather? Does it gather any information? Does it share any information? Research and reputation are key here. to let you make a reasonable, informed decision. Mozilla, actually, the Mozilla Foundation, who produces the Firefox browser, actually has a list called Privacy Not Included. If I have any time left, I'll show, where it actually rates things as creepy to not creepy, based on those devices. So things like the Facebook portal, or a Nest thermostat, or any of these things, or a Ring doorbell, as a good example. Those things, should I buy it? Do I want that in my home? I'm basically bringing a camera or a live microphone into my house. What does that company do with that information? Is it on all the time? These are great questions. Can it be compromised? What's their track record? These are all questions you should ask and be thinking about. And the Privacy Not Included list is a great starting place for that research. They're a nonprofit, so they don't really have any skin in that game, besides just caring about privacy a lot. Here's some helpful links. Of course, I'm willing to share this information. There are many things to do with cybersecurity. This is kind of the basics to protect yourself and your business, and just the things that you should be thinking about and talking about with your employees and your family and just everybody. There's the Privacy Not Included list. Have I Been Pwned is we didn't really talk about this, but I'll touch on this. This actually is a listing that allows you to put in an email address and see, has your email address appear on any compromised sites? In other words, has it been a part of any breach? And you can actually sign up for that for free, and it will give you alerts anytime. If your email address does appear, you should probably change your password, because there's a good chance it's been compromised. This is more information about two-factor authentication if that idea is interesting to you. They actually also have a good listing of two-factor authentication apps, almost all of which are free, and services that are two-factor. So big name services, Microsoft and Facebook and Twitter and whatever. So you can kind of do a little research about what two-factor authentication is available to you. I also recommend supporting the EFF, who does a lot for privacy and security on the internet, as does Mozilla Advocacy. I don't mean to push a political thing. It's not really political. Privacy is not political, in my opinion. That's just a state of reality. That's just a thing that's real these days, and deserves your time and attention. So those are a handful of things. I know I've gone over just a bit, Jen. I'm sorry, but I talk.
We're good. We run till 1. We leave some room for questions. So Chris has posted some questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and read a couple of those. He wanted to know how safe cloud services like Dropbox are.
They run the absolute gamut, Chris. Dropbox actually has a very good track record. They even have levels, though, if you'll read through their plans, and they'll use different kinds of compliance. Depends on what your need is. If you're just sharing information very generally with partners or with partners or vendors or employees, that's the baseline is probably good for you. But you also, if you have another need, like if you're in healthcare and you have to deal with HIPAA, or you're dealing with credit card information or payment information, and you have to deal with PCI, those compliance rule sets, you probably want to pay a little more, because you can get better security with Dropbox, but it's pretty good. The other services depends wildly. Some of them have absolutely atrocious track records, just atrocious. So a little research there. You mentioned Dropbox specifically, but I don't know if there's any others.
He did mention Dropbox specifically, and I do pay for Dropbox, so that makes me feel better.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing there is be careful who you share that with. If you're sharing a folder, be sure they give you a permission level you can give to the recipient. Be careful. Yeah,
I've been careful about that. A couple of other questions you've already answered, like malware recommendations for Mac. He did ask a question about, if you send a sensitive document as an email attachment, does it help to delete the email and the recipient to delete the incoming email after it's been read, or does that not really help?
Yes and no. That depends a little bit on the services. If you're using something like Gmail, not really, because they archive a lot. It will get eventually deleted from Gmail servers, but not immediately. And that's an important distinction. And I'm very, very glad you've asked. Other services, like if you house your own mail server or something, then the chances are, if both parties do that, then chances are deleting it immediately pretty well deletes it. But I would tell you that unless you know that as a fact, I would kind of assume that that email's been is here to stay for a while, probably a good while.
Yeah, awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? I think Jeremy just unmuted himself, so I'm guessing that's a yes.
Yeah. Hi, Randall. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yeah, I did have a couple questions. One was about past issues. So my favorite example, a long time ago, I got seriously phished, right? So I was trying to, I wanted to find a job in telco, and I was on Monster. This was back, I don't know, somewhere in the 2005, 2006, something like that. It was on monster.com, and received an email from AT&T that wanted to set up a phone interview. I mean, seemed totally legit, company letterhead, the whole nine, kind of that thing that you mentioned, where had I paid attention, I might have noticed that the font was a little weird, or they used the lowercase logo instead of the, there was probably some little things that might have indicated. But at any rate, so I had this like full phone interview where I think I disclosed basically everything about myself, including my social security number and all that stuff. It turns out it wasn't AT&T at all, right? So, I mean, I had been trying to get into AT&T for a while, and then suddenly I got this thing, wanted to set up a phone interview. It seemed totally legit, did it. So now that's been however many years, 15 years ago or whatever. That information, though, I'm sure has been floating around, passed around in these blocks of, of PI. But at any rate, so what do you suggest people do to kind of dig in? You mentioned the have I been pwned website.
Yeah.
But there are other things that you recommend that we go to just to say, I haven't really had any problems that have popped up per se. But it's just one of those, like, how do you, especially now that I'm, running my own business and doing a lot of stuff out of my house, it's like, you want to, okay, do I need to square away some past issues that might come back to haunt me at some point?
Yeah. And that's a tough thing because it's an unfortunately common story that, over the years that's happened to you, and you're just, maybe I'm okay, maybe I'm not. So, Have I Been Pwned is a good service. It's free. There's no reason not to drop an email in there, or even I literally keep I have like 5 email addresses, but they're all in there, and I get notices and newsletters and so on. Other things you can do, particularly around financial institutions and things like that. I would be sure to talk to your bank, credit card, even PayPal, and be sure that your security settings are as tight as they can be, that their fraud alert and fraud detections are absolutely top. Just as tight as they can be. When it comes to things like PayPal and services like that, where again they can get at your money, then you're probably going to want two-factor authentication. If your bank offers that, do that as well. Your big problem, unfortunately, is the risk you're running is identity theft, and it's just once that social security number and those kind of things are out there on the web, it's tough. There are other services that claim to scrub that and watch for that. You actually these days have identity fraud protection from some antivirus companies do that now, and even some and LifeLock's probably the famous one. And I've heard both. I've heard great stories. I've heard horror stories from all of these services. So it's hard for me to come down with a solid recommendation on how to protect your identity from that fraud. The biggest thing I can tell you, Jeremy, honestly, is just vigilance. I know you can with, for example, the IRS, and even you can turn on, it's kind of a two-factor of a sort. They have a PIN number you have to provide to file your taxes and deal with them. And that's probably worth it. It costs nothing. That's probably worth it right there. And then, of course, the things I mentioned about your bank accounts and PayPal accounts and things like that. Unfortunately.
I did have one other, if we've got time, if that's okay. I don't know.
Just one more. Yeah, I wanted to also add to that. You can go to like Equifax and stuff, and for free put a hold on your credit reports so that nobody can pull a credit report, and you get an email. Now it's kind of a pain because you want to go to all 3 big ones, and you have to do it like manually at each one, but it's free. So it's essentially doing what LifeLock does, but you're doing it personally. And you can lock it for like 6 months at a time. So then every 6 months you got to relock it. But as long as you know you're not buying a car or refinancing or something, it's a good thing to do.
Okay.
That's great advice. I didn't think about that.
And then the other bit was, so many of us are working from home now where we're doing stuff that may have previously been in a more secure business environment, but now we're doing it from home, where our kids are using these apps that are, who knows how secure these apps are, and they have access to Google accounts. And, we have my wife not too long ago said, honey, I got this email about our phone bill not being paid. What is this? Well, I don't know. I paid the phone bill, so let me see. Did you tap on this attachment that they sent? Yeah, I did, but it didn't do anything. It just, oh, great. So what the heck was that? Right. So like, how do you, what's the best way to insulate yourself from the natural threat vectors that come from just being at home?
Connected to the internet. Probably one of the best things you can do at home. Well, and that's real. Probably one of the best things you can do at home in that kind of environment. Two things, just fundamentally. I would just be sure that anything that is sensitive is not shared with those kinds of devices. So email addresses being a thought, things like that. The other thing is, quite frankly, those devices, those internet security appliances I mentioned a short while ago, like the Bitdefender Box 2 or the Cujo firewall. Those are doing that kind of they're doing kind of an anti-phishing, anti-malware, antivirus checking at the router. So in other words, cable from the whatever modem you have from Comcast or whatever to this box, to whatever, to all the devices wirelessly or whatever. And it's checking that everything in, everything out. So it provides you a lot of protection for your Internet of Things devices like your Nest thermostats. And also if your wife or you or even a guest who's just visiting opens up something on their phone and hits something crazy, some crazy link or whatever, it will stop it. It'll say, nope, I won't let you go to that. That has been verified as trouble. And those things are actually reasonably inexpensive. For the home user, they're reasonably inexpensive. You're talking $150, $200. And they a lot of times bundle in antivirus and anti-malware protection for all your devices for free as part of that subscription. Worth it, worth every penny. Hard to turn that down.
And Jeremy, the other added value is you can set parameters around when your kids can use devices and stuff too.
Right.
Absolutely.
I guess the concern for me was that, okay, so once there's been something introduced into the network, is there some kind of persistent tunnel now that's been established such that, that vector's like always there now? Because this the device, right? Because there's things like MAC addresses, and so if there's like some kind of permanent way to access that, and of course Apple, like everything's connected, so I have my iTunes, which is also on my wife's computer's iTunes, is connected to her phone, which is also connected to my work laptop, and it just goes on and on.
If you're the short answer to the question is hard to say. I know that's not really an answer.
Sure.
It depends on what the compromise is. It depends on what happened when you went to the website. The box I'm describing in anti-malware protection solves it, because even if that persistent connection had existed, the minute you put in that box and whatever device tries to connect to something that's not that's insecure or unsafe, it shuts it down. So it doesn't matter anymore whether it's been compromised or not.
Right.
So that's, again, I'm not necessarily trying to get you to spend money, but this is money well spent.
Right. Yeah, I kind of always fell back on just the assumption that my router and my hardware was doing enough work, right? That the firewall.
Most of them are most of that's very, very basic, and it's gotten so sophisticated that it just requires a slightly higher level of intelligence. That's a shame, but it's just the fact, just the nature of reality.
Right.
Awesome. This was a great presentation and great questions, everyone. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Randall.
Thank y'all so much.
We're gonna wrap it, and we'll get this online later today. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks so much. Y'all have a great day.